Hello and welcome to another episode of Hydra's Den. I'm your host Hydra, and today with me we have Golem.
Howdy.
Hey, so if you were around for last episode, you may have seen that we ran a session that we made the episode before. This is the last in a sort of three-part little series I'm making here, which is making the session, running the session, then the post session. Perhaps some of you saw that 4.5 hours of stream and said no, I'm not going to watch that, and that's fine. We'll basically be covering some of the post game stuff today. Our main goal here is to kind of demystify the post game process and cover one of the most important things that many DMs miss, which is interacting with your players and learning from them. Okay, so let's open this little slideshow thing, and from there. Or actually, you know what? I can go straight into the Firefox. I guess some people who are just listening to this at home, not actually watching, won't really be able to see this. Whoops, that's that. Really? Is it gonna? It's gonna stick on that. Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay, so I'm just taking, for people who aren't watching, I'm just moving over to the actual page that I used for the game. So we can kind of see a little map here of what happened. Golem, if you want to go on to Roll20, or you can just watch it through the stream, I guess, through Twitch. Either way, yeah. Which one?
Sure. Let me just open up the stream 1 sec.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as I said, some people who weren't here last time, I formed a GOPD game. For those who haven't seen what a GOPD game is, we've done videos on that before. Basically, quick movie-esque, very action-focused one-shots with just an emphasis on quick gunplay and exploration creativity. So we had my good host here, Golem. We had Trent, and we had a couple of guests on to run this. And it went pretty well, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is that after a game's over, one of the most important things that you could do as a DM is going to be to talk with your players about what you did good and what you did bad. I guess more important here is going to be what we did bad, because, well, I mean, we could go over what I did good as well. Golem, what was your experience, to be honest?
No, I thought it started out really strong, and then it got a bit tedious towards the end. But throughout the main line of the story, it was pretty cool. I enjoyed a lot of it. Like most of it was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, and to be honest, most of it did go as we originally planned. If anyone was around for the first episode of the sort of three-parter, you would have seen that I did take a few creative liberties when I moved forward into the actual design of it. But most of this is pretty much straight how we originally, what me and Albert originally came up with. As you could see, we sort of started at the top and moved down. I had a whole little sketch I made out where it was people be moving, and it was kind of just like start here, move over this way, come down here to the west wing, and it go back, and it's a whole thing. But the important point is, as you said, that it started getting a little weaker around the end. I remember you actually came to me a couple of days after, and you explained a bit about this. Do you want to go over a bit of that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, specifically towards the end, when we were getting down to the south part over there, down to where the cryo and the boss room is. Yeah, just that large area together. So I guess the two things that were really kind of not apparent to me at the point in time when we were playing is that the moment we walked into the cryo room, basically the pursuer monster, which was essentially like an invincible kind of scary boy, yeah. Right? Essentially kind of like Mr. X, I guess, from Resident Evil. He barreled down the hallway, and essentially we had no way out from there, right? So we had to decide exactly what to do. And it was kind of pressured because it seemed to, well, at least to me, that there wasn't really any way to get, like, we knew we had to get him into the cryo chamber, like, to freeze him, but there wasn't really any way to do it because the button was on the outside and the actual freezing part was on the inside, and there was only one door. So no matter what we did, it seemed like he would just, like, kill everyone on the way, and then just go into the cryo room. So there would be no one left to to activate the actual thing because it was really really fast.
Yeah.
Right.
So that actually is 100% my problem. So one thing that I would go over here and is that the biggest problem is I made the crowd room too small, I think. If the cryo room had been a bit larger, you would have had a bit more. And if I had made it a bit easier to activate the cryo device, it would have been a lot easier to sort of lure him properly.
Yeah, I think if it had like a second door, or maybe like the point of entry to the actual cryo room, or maybe if you could activate it from the inside at the like the cost of some damage, or yeah, make the cryo room larger so you have more room to maneuver.
Yeah, precisely. Because the tokens, just the way I was conveying the tokens was I can't move this properly, but the idea is generally there that the way I was making the tokens was just kind of a general sort of idea to get of how big they are. I don't think if we actually measured based on units that he'd probably be the exact size I put him as, but it was just kind of there to give him that sort of size, that imposing size to intimidate people. But the other side of that is that he was too large to, like, if you look at him relative to everything else, things weren't made to scale properly. That was one problem, and I think one of the other problems that was definitely coming up was and I remember when I talked a little bit with the players afterwards, was that I didn't convey well enough how to that the monsters were attracted to heat.
Right. Yeah. I remember distinctly thinking that the monsters were attracted to sound for the longest time, and only I think even only after the session when you actually told us is the only time I realized that they were attracted to heat more than sound.
Yeah,
like that didn't even cross my mind. So
yeah, so that's
partially probably my fault for being thick, but at the same time, like I just did, like from my perspective, I didn't realize it all.
No, that's actually I'm gonna take that one again. This is a classic issue that you'll see actually in a lot of games, especially new GMs, where the GM has this issue where the players aren't doing what they need to do to win. If they had just done X, or whatever X is, if they had just, pulled that lever, it would have been way easier. Or if they had just used fire against the troll, anything like that. And the thing is that what that often will come down to is what I'm going to call poor conveyance. Conveyance meaning effectively, like your ability to sort of teach the players by showing them things. So the easiest way to do that, and it's a bit of a cop-out, but it's a way I like doing so. Maybe it speaks more to my laziness than anything, would be to simply have a creature early on, maybe one of the maybe a boss, maybe something else, and have him having the players enter a room with him in it, and then he's like a fire starts for whatever reason, perhaps a wire short circuits or something like that, and he turns and he goes for that instead of for the players. It would have to be something that very clearly shows that it's fire, not sound, not anything else.
Yeah, because I remember we used flares a lot, and I mean, flares produce like sound. A somewhat large amount of heat, but they also they also produce sound, right? So I thought it was the sound that they were following, but it was actually the heat.
Yeah, and so it's a combination thing too. You can't, like, the DM can't entirely take the blame for it.
Oh yeah, no, obviously. Yeah.
So it is both sides do need to come together, but just talking with the players and learning things like this. And more importantly, I remember we went over a bit about the final boss fight and how it was difficult to figure out how to get in.
Yeah, it was about figuring out to get in. For me, I had a big issue because since when we went into the room, we didn't really have a turn order started up, so I couldn't gauge time properly. And what happened is, like, I would throw in a flare, and it would go for the flare and then react to me, and then I think it was another player would basically launch the freeze ray, and it would freeze the guy, but then it would still react. So those actions took place maybe like 10-15 seconds apart, but because there was no turn order, it was kind of difficult to gauge exactly how far apart they were. So I thought all of those actions happened within one turn. Yeah. So I was like, well, what are we supposed to do? Because it's reacting literally on every turn to every single person doing things, and it's just like, well, and there's only one door, and like, what do we do, right?
Yeah. That's, once again, part of that could have been helped by making the area larger in order to give the everyone more wiggle room. The monster can have more room to actually do stuff, so you don't have to. So the monster can be a little slower.
Yeah, because it seemed it was way too fast, right? Yeah. Like it was way too fast and powerful, and there was nothing we could do. It was kind of like squad morale broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Case of kind of like morale loss for us there.
Yeah. One thing that as a DM you could tell if your players are going to have problems is when you get the point where everyone's stuck and they start asking about roundabout ways to get around it. In this case, I really wanted the players to go through the whole, take down the 2 electrical things. But when they started going into things like where's the power coming from and stuff like that, I realized that there was a good chance that they were effectively going to circumnavigate the entire fight. That's a typical thing that'll happen with your players if they don't view the fight as being something that they can realistically take on or that they realistically want to take on. I'm sure you could agree.
I agree. That's definitely how it felt at the point in time.
Yeah, so something that simply appears too hostile or that just does not give a proper sort of projection of this is how we deal with this will always lead to that situation. Now, I did sort of force the issue by breaking the windows and then having it come to an actual sort of head-to-head, you deal with the boss now or, everything's lost. And that came to a kind of cool conclusion, in my opinion. I don't know.
Helped out. Yeah, no, because we were just stuck there not really doing anything. It definitely did help out, but obviously it would have been cooler if we just figured something out ourselves. But I think that was a pretty good response.
Yeah. So this is a good example. What I'm talking about here of trying to figure out what went wrong and understanding how to improve on it. So from here, I think it's a good way to segue kind of right into the sort of meat of the issue that I wanted to talk about, which is the concept of demystifying the DM. Now, what that means is that a lot of DMs, I have seen this actually so many times, and I just recently sort of gave it that name of demystifying him because I kind of picked that up from what someone was talking about, where a lot of DMs, once a game is over, they just think, the game is over, I'm going to go off and do my own thing, because there's always this divide between the players and the DM. It's the DM sets up his thing and the players run through it. It's never... The fact that the DM is really just bumbling along as much as the players are is never really comes into play. Golem, you don't have as much experience, but you've run your own session, and I'm sure there is a sort of a need almost to try and keep yourself more aloof from the players.
Yeah, I'd say so. Generally, I do try to talk to them post-game, but again, at the same time, I have kind of a worry that I'll give away too much about the story if I talk to them too much about it. So I do talk to them about the game, but then I'm limited. I feel like I'm limited in the responses that I can give to them, and sometimes it does feel that I need to be more forward with it and just kind of talk to them as people instead of just as a DM.
Yeah, precisely. So this type of there's always that risk. You don't want to spoil the game. You don't want to let everything go, but at the same time, what too many DMs will do is, because they feel the need so much to not let anything go, they will simply not talk at all with the players. They will simply have their game. The game is over, and that's it. And they'll be very, very cagey, very aloof in everything else because they feel the need to keep up this sort of division. The problem with this, though, is that if you do keep this up, you can't actually learn what you did wrong, but more specifically, you can't get their perspective. DM, to some extent, you will learn from your own mistakes. You'll pay attention to something and go, well, okay, this is what I did wrong. But your players will also give you a lot of insight, too. Just talking with Golem here, it gave a lot of good sort of input on, what I needed to improve, specifically, and more specifically, the perspective, the player perspective on that. And what that effectively means is that having the player's perspective allows you to better cater it to that player moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, because, absolutely. Because, the game is basically, it's not just the DM, right? It's the DM and the players, right? So ultimately, the goal should be to tailor to the players that you're playing with, because these are people that you're playing with for potentially a long time. Even if it's a one-session thing, it still works, but especially if you're playing for a long time, then you'll definitely want to, get to know your players, get to know what they like. It'll probably even help them come back. They'd really want it. If they really want to come back to it, if they're really excited about it, then they'll come back for it. And if you know what they want, then you can get them excited about it.
Yeah, exactly. Another very important thing thanks for actually bringing up that exact point, is that by talking with them afterwards, you can learn what they really liked, which means that you can cater more towards that type of stuff. A lot of players, when they're moving in, a lot of DMs when they're moving in around the beginning, they'll have a general idea of what they want to do now, but often they'll get to a point where they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go with this. I know I want to do something, but I don't know what. And there's a lot of one of the biggest things here is there's a lot of fear that the players won't like it. And you can't just sit there and guess. And more importantly, though, asking the players like right off the bat is like, what do you want out of the session is okay, but typically asking them like fresh off the session what they thought is even better, because typically the players will come up with things mid-session gripes that they have, and those gripes will kind of come out very as clearly as possible right after the session.
Yep, I agree. I mean, basically, a lot of people won't even really know what they want or what they don't want before they even start playing, especially if it's session 0 or session 1, sorry. But after a session, like even throughout the session, you can basically gauge people's reactions to the things that say, oh, okay, this guy really doesn't like this specific aspect of the game, so maybe I'll tone down on it when he's involved and things like that, right? And
of course,
after the game, they'll have a better opinion on what they like and what they don't like, especially because like if it's their first time playing with you, they don't really know you, they don't know your playstyle, so they can't really give you a tailored response just for you, right? But after the session, they will be able to do that.
Yeah, that's fair. And but more so than that, there's a lot of players who think that they know what they want, and this is going to sound this might sound a little bit pretentious, but a lot of players will say they know what they want, but a lot of players don't actually know what they want. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to use a specific example here, where in my main D&D campaign, I have a guy who plays the barbarian, right? He's a big barbarian lizard man, and he isn't the type who's really engaged in heavy dialogue stuff, right? He doesn't. Yeah. He doesn't like a lot of character interaction stuff, or so he told me. But when I brought up stuff that he was into the sort of the very primal nature aspect sort of thing, and when I started talking about that type of stuff, when I talked about monsters and getting stronger and things like from that point of view, the point of view that his character would be personally interested in, suddenly he was very invested. He was very interested in what we were talking about. And what I figured out from that is that it's not so much that he wasn't interested in talking, but more so that he liked he sort of resonated with the character he was playing, and what he wanted to do was stuff he could be more into with his character.
Yeah, I guess people talk more about I guess if you ask people straight on, they'll try to provide you like a general answer, but ultimately, I think it's more fine-grained. Like, he said he didn't like talking, period, but he specifically liked talking about some very specific things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so...
And it more so than that, this player also has, strangely enough, become one of the most diplomatic people in the party.
You got the diplomat barbarian.
Well, that's the thing, is that he has become sort of notorious for really good sort of takes on things. He makes very, well-spoken arguments and stuff like that. And
that's actually kind of funny. I want to see that.
Oh, it's hilarious, and it's also really uncanny because he's playing like an 8-foot-tall lizardman berserker. Yeah. So it's always a bizarre thing, but he's kind of come out with this very sort of soft-spoken, very accurate takes on things, very fair takes on things. Whereas he doesn't get colored because he's coming in as the outsider, and he likes doing that. And that's also part of it, is that when we get into political intrigue type stuff, he'll very often give the most straightforward answer of, well, I mean, we could just, kill him and move on. And a lot of, at first I sort of got the idea, that he just isn't really interested in it. But what I realized is that, no, that's the way he's sort of looking at it, is he's looking at it from the most, ground level, basic, not basic even, ground level, but grounded perspective. That's not politically aligned. That's not getting into noble families or anything like that. He's just thinking, this is how we solve this.
So would you say that he provides a contrast to the rest of the party, or the setting as a whole, really?
No, definitely to the rest of the party, since most of the rest of the party is very much more polished, much more high class.
Right. I see. Okay.
So he brings in that very grounded perspective, which actually does really help to keep the party interactions proper.
So basically, he's a barbarian, he's super strong, and he's an outsider, but he's not stupid. So
Exactly.
he can definitely think, but he just doesn't think the same way that others would.
Exactly. The way I like to think of it is it's the animal brain, you know, because
Right, yeah.
But the idea though that I'm trying to get across here is that what you originally might think about what the players are saying and what they might be saying might not actually be their true gripe with the thing. In the same way, I have a guy who plays healers, and he absolutely hates it because his players, I mean, the players can be incredibly dumb sometimes. He has to, patch up everyone all the time. But when he actually gets a chance to play his character properly, and when he gets a chance to examine things, like examine more of his character from a moral perspective and stuff like that, he gets a lot more interested,
Yeah, so I guess actions speak louder than words in this case. So just kind of observe what your players do and gauge on that instead of what they actually say. And
yeah, and then but also after sessions, get their see what they say and see what they do, and then get their sort of viewpoints on why they did it.
Right.
Understanding the motivations behind why someone will do something is so important. I mean, I understand this now because I've been doing this for a while, but this something like this happened quite long ago when I was starting out, and where I had a situation much similar to this, where I had the players and there was like a boss or whatever ahead, and the players couldn't figure out how to get in, and they were doing all this stuff, and they were just kind of sitting there and humming and hawing. They were debating leaving and coming back with some other stuff, and what it came down to, and I thought that they thought they couldn't take on the boss or something like that. But what it turned out was they didn't think they could actually fight that boss. They didn't think that they were supposed to. They thought that there was supposed to be some other way around this.
No. I mean, it's very similar to what happened in our case.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in our case we kind of knew that we had to fight it. We just we didn't know how. But it's similar, I think, right?
Yeah, it's
the same impasse. It's the same kind of.
Yeah, it's the same situation where if the players think, and I'm not going to say that if your players get into that situation that you should entirely do something like what I did, which was just bust open the arena and force the issue. Sometimes you could reward the players for getting creative. If I were to say something that I could have improved, I don't know if I would have liked it personally because it's rather unclimactic. But if they had just said, well, where are the generators connected to? Oh, they're connected to the reactor. And then they just gone outside and cut the cables that way. It would have been effective. It would have been incredibly anticlimactic and disappointing, but you know what I mean? It's the type of thing where that might be a punishment on the DM too.
Yeah, that's true, because actually we were thinking about stuff like that, right? Like we were like, okay, yeah, we can just go outside and cut the power, but at that point in time we weren't even thinking it's like, oh, it's going to be anticlimactic or not, because we were too in the game.
Yeah, of course.
We're too enthralled, so we weren't even thinking about that, but you're right. You're absolutely right. I think if it ended like that, that would just be bad. It's just like, oh, shit.
That's
it's over? That's it?
Yeah, precisely. And that's why I couldn't, allow that to happen. That's why I had to state, in the session what I stated was, no, the power generators are underneath it. And in general, that's actually typically a bad thing for a DM to do, is just shut down creativity all the time. Just say, no, you can't do that. No, you can't. Always saying no is generally a bad idea, but at the same time, understanding that if you say no, you will force the players to do something more interesting is also important,
I know. I mean, possibly if that was a possibility where we went into the reactor and actually shut it off, the thing probably would have tried to stop us, right? So that might have made it more exciting, but I don't know. Especially if it's not something that you planned for. I think it's not really. It's not 100% chance that it's going to work out, right? If you actually try to go along with that kind of path.
The level of improvisation might lead to something new and interesting, but at the same time, if you're not 100% sure, it might just mean that you need to spend more time thinking about it. It reminds another good example would be a video game thing. I was playing a video game MMO, Guild Wars 2, with some of my friends, and in this one we were going through a big dungeon. We got to the end, we saw a boss, and we were like, everything up to then had been really obnoxiously difficult. So we were going around and we found this boulders, just these generic boulders on the ground. But what we learned is that any enemy that gets hit by them gets knocked down and takes a little bit of damage. So instead of fighting this intense, tough ghost boss, it was the Ascalon dungeons for anyone who's wondering. Instead of fighting it, we decided, you know what? We can knock over that boss with this rock. So we got 4 rocks.
Just threw rocks at it?
Yeah, we came in with 4 rocks. There was 4 of us, and we stand cardinal directions opposite it. We just chucked rocks at each other, and every time the rock hit it, it just unlocked and knocked him over. And we just sat there and laughed as we stun locked this guy into utter oblivion. And what that effectively meant is that we completely ruined the final boss. We ruined the encounter, and thus in some ways we kind of made a very anticlimactic ending to that dungeon.
Yeah.
And that's the same.
That's funny that they allowed that to happen. Actually, like I can't believe that their tester wouldn't have done that.
Well, it's very legacy. It was a legacy thing, and it's gone
okay.
now. Yeah. But it's that sort of thing where if the players basically feel like there's something hostile in your session, they're going to turn on you. And by turn on you, I mean they're going to turn on the game itself. They're going to find like ways around it. They're going to try and be very creative. And so to keep everyone on track, you know what? If it happens now, just take the loss as a DM, and then explain to your players, well, this is what I wanted to happen, and like exactly what I'm doing right now, which is like the reason why the boss, I didn't want you guys just to go out and cut the power to the boss, is because the boss would have just died, and the boss couldn't really escape. He was stuck in the portal room.
But I mean, I don't think like nobody's perfect. I don't think players are gonna. I mean, like maybe some players will, but most people I don't think will judge you being like, oh yeah, I didn't think of this, so we're just gonna deal with it, kind of thing. Because I think people in general will understand, and they'll try to actually help you out. So I don't know.
Yeah, but a lot of players will like if the DM doesn't explain that though, it could just lead to sort of resentment between the two sides.
Yeah, exactly. People will just be like, oh, like he's just trying to cover it up. Like it's basically the opposite effect, where it's seen as dishonesty, even though you're just trying to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the right experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea that I think we can leave it, like this is probably going to be a pretty short session. We've covered most of what I wanted to go over here. I'm just going to double check the Twitch chat. I don't even have the Twitch chat open. And that just broke. Could you check the Twitch chat for just a second?
I actually don't have the Twitch chat open either because it crashed on me. So I have Roll20 open instead.
Oh, well, I'll just pull up the Twitch chat nice and fast. Hopefully that won't pop up on this. It won't. For
all the 2 people watching, or however many that is.
Yeah. Just in case.
Hey, maybe someone commented. Yes, maybe someone commented. Don't want to leave them out.
We don't have anyone in the comments. This is probably just going to go up for recording. The main point I wanted to just kind of make, though, is, talk with your players, learn from your mistakes, and don't be afraid to admit that you screwed up, because, you're going to, your players, if you make your players understand that you're human, they're going to be a lot more understanding, they'll be a lot more helpful, and it's, for any of the players who are listening, just remember, your DM is going through a lot of hassle to put this together. Mistreating DMs is the leading cause of DMs not DMing anymore.
Yep, communication is very important.
Yep, communication is key. That's about all I really wanted to go over from here. We've learned a little bit from the, going that over the post stream, and that will tie nicely together with the others, and we'll get this uploaded. Anything you wanted to put in for the end there, Cole?
No. I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what we're going to be doing from 2 weeks from now, but hopefully we'll have something closer to that time. So I've been Hydra, once again, from Hydra's Den. If you want to come on, ask me any questions, play any games or anything like that, I'm most active on our Discord. That will be in the comments. It'll be in the description, probably, of the video. And you could probably find me through there, shoot me a message, whatever you need. I'll be happy to help out, or anyone else really on the server. And I hope I see anyone around for next week. Well, next 2 weeks from now. And have a great day.
Toodles.